Hey, I'm Paul from VRP Rocks, and I'm delighted to be bringing you another My Five Favorite. And I love these because we get to hear from the artists themselves, the musicians, the singers, the rock stars that tell stories from their own catalogue, from their own history. And we get to understand why they like certain things, whether that's their favorite songs or their favorite albums, or in this case, it's their favorite recording sessions. And we're going to hear from rock royalty, a man who's played with so many legends, it's hard to reel them all off. I'm just going to introduce Mr. Tony Carey.
It sounds like professional wrestling, Paul. And now I
In the
see your
red
backdrop.
corner.
Yeah, yeah. I see you. I see all the pictures of me behind you, which I guess I'm assuming your viewers will see.
Yep.
Look at that. Wow, what a cute young boy. Oh, what a mean old man. Got the whole gamut there. I met Joe Cocker. I'll start with my Joe Cocker. One
Start
of
with Joe
one of
Cocker.
my
Go on
one
in.
of my Joe Cocker stories. I met Joe Cocker in West Hollywood, California, when I was out there with my own band. We had a record deal. We were trying to get a record done with ABC Dunhill, and this was just months before uh, I ran into Richie Blackmore and tossed all my buddies under the bus and went with Richie Blackmore to see the world. So I even had a key to his rented house because he had a piano in there when he was on the road, and he didn't remember this, and I'd go in and practice the piano because I was living in an apartment. It's not that many grand pianos to play. So this was in 1970, I guess I'm going to say 73. In 19, I think it was 89, had to be maybe 89. I was doing a lot of producing for mostly people that you won't be familiar with, but that are European artists, primarily German, and some Italians and stuff. Big, huge gold records that you've never heard of. I mean, like so the label, the guy from the label calls me and says, "Could you imagine working together with Joe Cocker?" I said, "Well, I know Joe. Yeah, of course I could." And he's in Hamburg. He was in Hamburg. He was on tour, and they said, "We need a song for a movie soundtrack, and it's a TV detective, but a huge TV series, and they were doing a full length movie of and Joe Cocker was slated to sing the title song, if you will, and they had a melody, they didn't have words, and they had I was pretty much ready to go, except they needed lyrics and they needed a producer. So I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." I went up and talked to him as he was between periods because he had some dark periods where Joe in the 70s and 80s where I don't want to get into detail, but everybody knows Joe Cocker stories. He was clean, let's put it that way, clean enough, a couple of beers. So this was like I wanted to see if he was, first of all, if he could get anything out of him, and yeah, he was lovely, and we had a nice talk. So his whole band came down to the studio. I was working. It's actually now Leslie Mandoki's studio. How things go around in circles. And I wrote the lyrics and produced a song called "Now That You're Gone." And here's how the session went. They roll up in a tour bus because they're on the road, and had a full band, 3 backing singers. And most impressively, Michael Lang, the guy that promoted Woodstock anyway, was Joe's manager at the time. And I was most knocked out by him. So we spent a day recording the track, and it was fine. And Joe had 3 or 4 German beers. And the last thing he did was sing. And I knew I'd never be able to use this vocal. He sounds like he's been on the road, and first you got to get it off the road, rest your voice for 2 weeks, then you can make a recording. So the band, we kind of made a plan. So the band packed up. Joe sang. I said, "Man, that's fantastic. We got a hit. This is great." And they all drove into Munich where they were staying, which is an hour and a half away. Put Joe to bed, And then the band came back to the studio and we did a lot of stuff I wanted to do. We did the choir again. We did the Hammond organ again. We tightened things up and we worked another 6 hours on the track, unbeknownst to Joe. And Michael Lang said, yeah, it's great, it's great. And I was thinking, yeah, now it's getting great. So what I eventually ended up doing is mailing him with a courier the 2-inch tape. He lived in Santa Barbara, California at the time. Mailed him the 2-inch tape, and then he went into the studio there and he sang it. And it was fine. It was great. It was Joe. And they even put it on one of his greatest hits albums. So the song did well. And the movie did really, really well. And but I thought that was so hilarious. The whole band gets see you next year. You know, if you ever need to, you know, call if you need a producer, that kind of thing. And then the band sneaks back out and they put him to bed.
Wonderful stuff. Joe Cocker stories always go down well, don't they? So that's your first one then. Your
Especially
second...
nice Joe Cocker stories.
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. So let's move on to story 2 then. Your second session you mentioned to me was Chris Norman. We know him here in the UK for Smokey. And you picked a session where he recorded, was it Jenny Lee, I think you said?
Here's what happened. Same thing. I got a call from his record label. And I was producing daily something and projects. I mean, maybe 100 albums over the course. I said, "Do you want to work with Chris Norman?" I said, "Well, let me. I don't know him. I love his voice. Let me check him out." So I flew somewhere to a hotel, met him in a hotel bar, and it turned out his wife was pregnant, and he's a family man, and he really didn't want to leave her. And I said, "All right, let's do this. I'll write you songs and I'll sing them. And if you like them, all you got to do is I'll send it to you once again with a courier. And you just put your vocal on and maybe one of your 12 string, you know, what he does. And then call it good and nobody has to work too hard." He said, "That's a good idea." So I did, and we did Jenny Lee among some others. And by that time, technology had crept into the recording process to the point where we had, this is nerdy, but we had something called samplers and MIDI controlled instruments. So the way the session was is that most of the music, like the drums and all the keyboards and all the things, were coming from boxes. And the vocals and the background vocals were bass and guitars would be coming from the actual tape, the 2-inch tape, and they synced together. So I charged, was it Polygram? I think Polygram Records a fortune for I mean, you know, being rock royalty as I am and all that
Why
shit.
not? Yep.
I charged them an arm and a leg for the production. So I sent the tapes over to Chris, and he sang them beautifully and sent them back. And that happened to be on the day that the courier, who was supposed to deliver the 2-inch big heavy tapes, it was his first day and it was too much pressure for him. He didn't know what to do. He ended up dumping the tapes in a dumpster somewhere.
No way.
And just disappearing. Yeah. And so we had lawyers involved and we had the police involved and the federal police here, which is like the FBI here. Everybody, no, they were gone. He didn't remember where he dumped them. He's so sorry, he'll never do it again. And he basically threw away Chris Norman's album. So I went to the label and they said, "Well, what do we do?" And they said, "Well, you have to do it all again, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, that's a shame." And I sent him a bill for exactly the same sum for the first time. And everything was already in the computers. And what I basically had to do was sing the vocal for him to learn and the background vocals and acoustic guitar. And that was all I had to do. I did it in 2 days, what had been 2 months, and recreated it and did not have a single twinge of conscience because they're all crooks. And so Chris got that back. And sung it. It's gorgeous. Sent it to me. Got it, and the rest is history. But this is, by the way, from his album called The Interchange, which I'd be, I guess, 89 or 90. And I thought it was hilarious with the way I got one over on the record labels, because the record labels got quite a few over on me.
You got quite a few over on a lot of people, didn't they?
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. So one up for Tony Carey there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's move on to your next one then. And this one is something we've spoken about in the past as well. Room with a View. It was something from a movie, a huge movie, wasn't it? So tell us about this one then, Tony.
First of all, it's an enormous hit. Oh, yeah. So I'm was really prolific. And I always had drawers full of stuff. Like, need a hard rocker, pull drawer A. Need a campfire ballad, drawer. Need semi-classical. You need heavy metal. I always had all kinds of stuff that I just recorded because I was in the mood that day. So this guy comes to me, the biggest TV producer in Germany. And he was doing a 3-part series in Christmas time, prime time. And the story was about a German family that goes to California, of all places, and has adventures in this and that. I said, I have to think about that. I thought about it for about 2 seconds and let the guy wait a couple of weeks. And I had Room with a View ready to go, mixed everything. And I sent it to him, and he flipped out. The guy just loved it because he didn't understand the lyrics. This German guy, the refrain, the chorus says, "They say it never rains in LA County." That sold him. Done. Got it. That's our song.
That's
and
enough,
it's really pretty. It's a good song. But the story is about a guy that drunk himself out of a family, a marriage, a job, everything, and he's living in a refrigerator box in Los Angeles somewhere, in a homeless encampment, and he's happy because he's finally got a room with a view, which is his refrigerator box. And the guy never got the lyric, never figured it out. I didn't tell him. They used it, and it was a smash hit, which I completely did not expect. And it just zoomed up the charts. My label guy called me. He said, "You won't believe what's going on." I said, "Oh, great. So it was on TV a bunch of times, and it sold. It still keeps the lights on in this house. I mean, it's right. But I might have told a little white lie when I said I have to think about this first. Might have.
So how does that change something like you for being having a smash hit like that over in Germany and things like that? How does that change things for you?
No, not at all.
No?
Not at all. I was actually making too much money in the 80s because I was producing #1 albums for like several people, and it was just another day at the office, And I say this in all humility. It was just the way it was, and it didn't change anything. I mean, I'm still really stubborn. I'm home with my family where I should be. I always have my own studio in the house, and it didn't change anything except that all of a sudden I'm I don't know what a celebrity.
Yeah.
Which in my own mind I probably always was or never was. Anyway.
Rock royalty. I think we've used that phrase once or twice. There you go. Let's move on to choice 4 then, and this one's an interesting one. John Mayall, Chicago Line. Tell us about this session with John Mayall then. Legend.
John Mayall gave Eric Clapton his first starring role with the Blues Breakers, and he's a lovely guy, and he had been the guest star on a tour on which I was a special guest. And this is a German artist, but big German artist, the biggest German artist. He's selling out arenas. And I got to know him. And after Just loved the guy. And after the tour, he said, you know, can we do a record? I said, sure. So I went in and did his record, Chicago Line, for Island Records. And we were all happy, and it was great. And a few things on that stand out. Now, I thought blues, so I got him, especially, I thought I'd make him happy. This boutique amplifier guitar is way too expensive, red. You can see the tubes, the vacuum tubes, the valves.
Yes.
And I thought that'd be one. And it turns out his guitar player was Walter Trout, who's a monster. And he came in and looked at this boutique amp and laughed, said, "You got a Marshall?" Marshall stack. So Walter blew the walls out. He's still my buddy. This is a long time ago. And now blues records don't sell. So now this is kind of sad. So typically don't sell very well. And he presented me with you get gold records. He presented me with a blue record, which is so fantastic.
That's cool.
John Mayall and the Blues Breakers to Tony, thank you. And it's a blue record, mounted like a gold record, fantastic. Now, here's where it gets a little sad. About 2002, he called me. I was living in Spain, in Mallorca. And he called me and he said, "Remember how much fun we had?" I said, "Oh, hell yes." And he says, "You want to do it again?" I said, "Oh, hell yes." And I was excited. And he would call me back a couple of weeks later. I was going to go to LA and we're going to record it I would have done it at his house like Rick Rubin does, just bring in some equipment, or Daniel Lanois does the same thing. Bringing in some equipment where he's comfortable, and just because he was getting on in years. And he says, "Oh man, I got to tell you, there's no money for the budget." And I won't name the label. Why? They're all the same, so I won't name. But they actually wouldn't give him enough money, like for my plane tickets, my hotel, the equipment, the time. And I said, "John, I'll do it for free, and tell me how much you need. I'll pay you to do it." I mean, this is John Mayall. Come on.
Yeah.
And it never got made. And they ended up using he made a live album. I mean, somebody's up 2 microphones in on a tape deck in a club he was playing, and that was his album. And that's really, really sad, because, man, that guy contributed so much.
Oh yeah.
To I mean, everything. He lived in Laurel Canyon. Blues from Laurel Canyon, I think, was a John Mayall album. And he lived in Laurel Canyon is a part of West Hollywood, folks. And I was a huge fan from him as a teenager, so this didn't turn out well.
Shame. Oh, that's a shame. Lovely to hear about John Mayall, though. As you said, absolute legend and
Beautiful
Godfather
guy.
and everything. Yeah,
Beautiful
absolutely.
guy. John Mayall would always have the same thing. He would order he had one thing on his special wishes. They call it a rider, contract rider. And that was a roast chicken wrapped in tinfoil. And he would date them, put a piece of tape on it and date them. And he kept them for about a week, and they were roasting. And so he always had his chicken, and he would have parties in his room. And he had a road case, like a wardrobe case, like you carry your stage clothes in and stuff. And he'd open it up, and there was a TV, and he was famous for having the world's largest pornography collection.
Okay.
Until his house burned down in whenever. And he'd invite the guys in the band, and he said, "All I can offer you is chicken, but I got a lot of that." And so we'd unpack these aluminum foil wrapped chickens and have a chicken and beer party with Uncle Johnny. We loved him.
What more could you ask for than chicken and beer parties? Indeed. Let's move on to your 5th choice then, Tony, and find out what this one is.
Chicken, beer, and hookers?
Well, if you've got the budget.
If you got the budget. There's it's funny. My album, Lucky Us, was the hardest album I ever made. And because I started the record as a normal Tony Carey record. I had drums, bass, choirs, this, that, the kitchen sink, and the other thing, guitars, all that. And little, but it took me 4 years to make. And I had way too many songs, so that was making choices, cutting it down, cutting it down. And I finally got to the point where, and I was so insecure about this. The end result is piano and my voice and stories, autobiographical stories, mostly about my childhood and my parents, and just the vibe of growing up in 1950s. Very sparse, with just a piano, no drums, no guitars, no choirs, no nothing, just a little bit of orchestration. I like oboes, I like cellos and string sections, who doesn't? And that's a session, I won't call it my favorite session. It was like pulling teeth, but it was a memorable session because it took so long to find the right way to express myself the way I wanted to express myself. Yeah. That's never happened to me before. I had 3 different people mix it, and I always mix my own records because I was so indecisive. And then I ended up using my own mix. So, but it was like pulling
So
teeth.
how did that work then? If you're going along and kind of talk us through it. So were you stripping it back bit by bit, or did you just kind of almost tear it apart and say that's it and go in minimal?
Both. The first 3 or 4 songs, I would make simpler versions, and I said, wait a minute. I hope we haven't talked about this on a previous encounter, Paul, but a Japanese gardener has his stream with pebbles in it, and they make a sound. And his work for the day is he'll move a pebble. He won't add anything. He'll take something away. And the Japanese poetry, haiku, is 7 words or 11 words, and people work for years on haikus. I mean, they're crazier than I am. And so it started off, I just make things less, and then all of a sudden I realized there's nothing else there. There's just piano. And I said, okay, I started putting a little stuff back, just this orchestra stuff I mentioned. And it was like, once again, pulling teeth. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I really liked the album.
Indeed, and an interesting session then, an interesting way of making a record, which is always different. Yeah. So in terms of you making your records then, I mean, do you, obviously when you come to concepts and things like that, do you sit down with an idea beforehand, or do you just start writing songs and see how they mix, or how did your process usually go?
Both. Both. Usually it's related to something I'm reading. I read constantly. I'm a bookworm. I mean, I didn't play sports in school. I read books and played the piano in school. And whatever's on my mind, if I'm consciously writing something, I need some new material, it's time to write. When I write 2 or 3 things that are going in the same direction, I say, you know what, I'm going in this, let's keep this direction and expand on it, because that's a concept. What I mean is I won't mix in a prophetic, post-apocalyptic, politically based influenced album, I won't put a little silly love song, you know.
Yeah.
I'll consciously separate it. So but it's a journey, because you never know when you're starting, you know. And for Lucky Us, for example, I would be telling my wife, Marion, I would be telling her stories on the patio at night when the sun was going down about, you know, my family, my dad, my mom, going fishing, going camping, all the stuff you do as a kid. And she said, those would be great songs. I said, let me think about that. And that's how that developed. So there's no tried and true, you're going here and then it splits left to right. It doesn't do that. It splits into like an Escher painting, my universe anyway. And there's all kinds of different ways you can go. The hardest part is throwing stuff away, editing, basically. And but you do know it when you run out of things to say. So that's all I want to say. That's all I want to say about this for this period of time. I'm done, you know. And then you you've sung it, you know. You've got your lyrics. Every lyric has to be. There can't be a single bad word. I mean, a word that doesn't sing well, or is a cliche, or I go nuts. It makes my hair stand up. So that's a lot of concentration. So you get that, and then you say, I say, all right, here's the work. That's just as far as I'm going to take it. Now let me put it into shape to cohesive shape to release it. And that's the way it works with me.
Wonderful stuff. Well, it's been a
Did
pleasure
that make
hearing
any did that make any
it made
sense?
a lot of sense, Tony. Don't you worry.
Cool.
Don't you worry. Winner, winner. There we go. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your stories. We've heard about Joe Cocker and Chris Norman and John Mayall and huge selling songs in Germany and things like that. It's been wonderful spending this time with you again, Tony. Thank you so
Thanks,
much for your
Paul.
time and best of luck with everything going forward.
Thank you, man. Paul, call me anytime you need me. I'm here.